I think the future is really bright for CISOs. I think that they've got to kind of sharpen their skills in all of the areas. I like to tell them, what got you your first job as a CISO may not get you your next one.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership with one of the contributors to my latest book, the best-selling CISO Compass: Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, as well as other top CISOs and industry security leaders. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Joyce Brocaglia, Global Cybersecurity Practice Leader at Alta Associates and Diversified Search Group.
Well, Todd, I've been recruiting cybersecurity professionals since it became a standalone career. So in 1994, the Russians hacked into Citigroup. They hired Steve Katz as their first ever CISO. We built that first ever information security team, and we've been, placing CISOs and building the teams that support them ever since.
Yeah, well, it's a great job. Steve Katz, he also did a CISO Stories podcast for us as well, as the first CISO. So that takes us back a ways. Wow, you've been seeing CISOs through the whole evolution of CISOs then.
Yeah, I would say we have a very unique perspective of really, how the CISOs have kind of grown from a really technology back office function to truly, a C-suite and, leadership executive role. So quite a difference over the years.
Mm-hmm. So what sort of skills do you see as being necessary that organizations are looking for when they're recruiting CISOs?
Well, no two CISOs and no two organizations are alike. So, to answer that question, it really depends on the organization itself, the size, the industry, the maturity of their cybersecurity team, because, one size doesn't fit all, right? So what I would tell you, though, is, depending on whether or not there is a mature cybersecurity organization, what we're seeing for the most part is companies are looking to elevate the role. So a lot of searches we're doing today are actually searches that have a CISO in place or a head of cybersecurity, and they're bringing Alta in because they want to bring somebody on that I would call to be kind of that next breed, right, of cyber security leader. So many of our clients are going through digital transformations, and they want a transformative leader in the role of CISO. So they want someone, as they're digitizing and moving to the cloud, that has the technical acumen, yes, but that really has those cloud leadership skills. So think about agility, collaboration, the ability to really work across the lines internally and externally. Someone who can present to the board. And most of all, somebody who really sees cybersecurity as an enabler. In the old days when we started doing these searches, a lot of the security leaders, managed by FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? So now we're finding, that doesn't work anymore. And quite the opposite, that the cybersecurity leaders that they're looking for today, because the world is in such chaos, are those people that could be the calm in the storm. Those people that can really see through the chaotic craziness that's happening and focus on, getting back to basics, making sure that the crown jewels are secure, the company, but then also, partnering with all the transformational efforts to make sure that they can move into that cloud securely, and they're part of that in a very proactive way, as opposed to, bolting on security afterwards.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I really, really like the idea that the piece that you wrote is the insider's view of the CISO search for the CISO Compass book, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. And one of the things that really interests me about this is that the first chapter we had in the book was about CISO evolution, and I show a 5-stage model starting back with Steve Katz as the first CISO in the 1994-95 era, and bringing it forward to today in the shift that we've gone through to be more that business executive, but I still get these questions all the time of, well, does the CISO need to be technical? What would your answer be to that?
I think they need to be technical enough to be the leader of a technology-oriented area, right? I mean, cybersecurity is a technology-oriented function. However, the leader, cybersecurity itself, I think wrongly just gets thought of as a deeply technical area. And certainly there are parts of cyber that are, there's DevSecOps and there's pen testing and vulnerability management and, all sorts of things related to artificial intelligence and data analytics. And, there's a lot of very technical aspects to, engineering, architecture, operations. And there are very fine technical people in those staff roles. But when you look to the leadership, companies are less interested in how technical the person is, but rather in terms of, can they have a holistic approach to risk? Do they understand how to partner with stakeholders? What we're seeing now is a lot of companies are a combination of global corporations that have done multiple acquisitions and have, various lines of businesses and various risk tolerances. So they really need someone who has that kind of vision to be able to look across various entities and yet, pull together a cohesive security policies and plans and procedures and ways to interact with third parties, that makes sense for everyone. And that's why we see this BISO model being more and more prevalent, right? Where the cybersecurity leaders are actually putting business information security officers in their various, divisions or corporate entities. And that person becomes their eyes and ears, kind of like a mini CISO for that unit so that they can do the deep dive and have those relationships and, bring the strategy and the policies into the units, but also really develop those deep relationships with those business stakeholders and then have everything kind of married back up into the corporate vision and structure that the CISO holds, for the organization as a whole.
So what do you look for if you're looking for this digital transformation person? How do you vet that? How do you figure out that this person has what it's going to take for the organization?
Yeah. I mean, usually it's a compilation of past experiences, right? And, one of the things that worries me today when I think about succession planning, and you say just that question, how do you ensure that you have a leader? When you look at the Steve Katz era, or if you look at a lot of the folks that have been CISOs, they didn't graduate school with a technology degree, certainly not with a cybersecurity degree. They've kind of come up through the ranks. Maybe they worked in operations. Maybe they did sales. Maybe they had some P&L responsibility. Maybe they were in a marketing group. They eventually got into technology. Then they got into cyber, right? So by the time they became a leader, they had this well-rounded experience. What worries me today is that, we have huge expectations for the role of the CISO in terms of all of the areas of expertise that they need to know. But yet, sometimes because cybersecurity teams are so overwhelmed and so short-staffed, they really don't have the ability to take those people and give them rotational assignments or give them opportunities to stretch out into other areas of the firm. And by not having that exposure and that diversity of experience, it becomes very difficult as they move up the leadership ladder to expect them to have those kinds of skills. So one of the things that we look for when we're placing a leader is, what has their career path been? And from a digital standpoint, have they been engaged in those kinds of forward-thinking technologies? Have they already been a part of a move to the cloud? Have they been engaged with board members? Have they managed global organizations? Do they know how to deal with regulators? So there's a lot of pieces that go into interviewing somebody to see if they're right for the job. But then again, we also work on roles that are hiring their first time CISO, and they don't want all that. They want somebody who could roll up their sleeves, right? And then you do need somebody that has more technical skills. So that's why, back to what I said, one size doesn't fit all, depending on the size of the organization, the breadth of the role. Whether it's just cybersecurity or it entails cybersecurity, risk, privacy, whether the company's regulated or not, all those things factor into whether somebody's background, is a good fit. And, we do executive search. So we really work for the clients. They give us very specific criteria that they're looking for. Of course, we have the ability to kind of cajole and help them to broaden their perspective. And of course, sometimes I tease them and say that they have champagne tastes and beer pockets. So we also, give them a rationalization of what reality is in the marketplace, because, in my 36 years of doing search work, I've never seen a more demanding market than what I see right now in terms of cybersecurity.
When it comes to salaries, I know I've had this discussion with CISOs that the salaries seem to be all across the board. And sometimes there's these huge salaries that are put out there, and there's a whole bunch of CISOs saying, well, I don't know where those jobs are. So what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on roles right now that range from 400,000 to almost 5 million in total comp. So, it does vary greatly. And of course, again, back to size and scope, if the role has $1 million base salary, you probably have a team of a few hundred people, and a very global, far-reaching organization. If you're looking at a total comp in the 400 to 500,000, it's probably a team of less than 20 people. And, that person's going to be much more hands-on. So it runs the gambit.
Sure. And what do you see do you see big differences between what the Fortune 500 are looking for and the Fortune 2000 or Russell 2000, I guess you'd call it, in terms of what they're looking for?
I think the most common denominator in terms of what they are looking for, that's different than the past, is this sense of leadership. Is this empathy for their employees? Is the ability to build and maintain a team and to have true leadership skills, the ability to communicate, to be collaborative, to influence, manage, even when they may not have direct reports. I think that there's more similarities in that sense than to talk about the differences. I mean, the differences are kind of what you would expect depending on the size of the organization, right? So clearly, if you're dealing with a, top 100 financial services firm, is very much different than dealing with a nonprofit company hiring their first CISO. Or maybe a retail organization, or somebody that's in an industry that, up until now hasn't been focused on cyber.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. Where are you seeing most of the jobs reporting to these days as the CISO?
Yeah, I mean, we're launching a CISO search tomorrow that reports to the general counsel. I would say that's more of a mid-sized company. We are seeing that more often than we used to, but predominantly the role still reports to the CIO. I think what's more important than whether it reports to the general counsel or the CIO is that it's not buried in down too deep within an organization. When cybersecurity is at that director or vice president level, it really creates a lot of problems. It also creates a lot of problems for recruiting because people don't want to come in and be buried. And for the company itself, when they think about both inwardly and outwardly who they want representing them as their cybersecurity leader, it really behooves them to put them, at that chief level, or to have them be a +1 to the general counsel or the CIO or the CEO, because they want that person to have the gravitas internally. And they also, if they're dealing with regulators or if they're dealing with auditors or if they're, on stage at a conference advocating for their company, it's important that they have the title that goes along with the role.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed that you said in your write-up that there's different functions underneath the CISO, things like GRC, IT risk management, possibly physical security, and one of the elements was privacy. Are you seeing more security officers also having that privacy remit that sometimes is under a legal umbrella?
Yeah, we had filled in a number of roles that are entitled Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer, but I would say largely for the most part, they're two separate roles, with the Chief Privacy Officer predominantly reporting to the General Counsel and the CISO, mostly reporting to that CIO/CTO.
And you also talked about that there's the CISO needs to be credible in the organization, and that's what you look for. And how do you assess that they're going to be a credible CISO in their new role?
Yeah. Well, I think past performance is a good indication of future performance. So, when we're interviewing people, the beauty of Alta Associates is that we've been in this field for, like I said, since 1994. So that means we know the candidates incredibly well. We've placed them multiple times in their careers. We've built their teams for them. We kind of know where the secrets are lying. So we have a huge advantage to some of the other recruiting firms that are looking at resumes. We actually pride ourselves in knowing the people. And I think having done, so many executive searches, you really start to get a great understanding of the questions to ask, right? And that starts with what we call the launch call. So at the launch call, we'll be in a meeting with that executive team, and it might be the CIO and the general counsel, the chief human resources officer. And when you say, how do you qualify the candidate? A lot of it goes back to the specifics that these people want, not only in the job, but in terms of the culture of their organization, right? Because cultural fit is hugely important. When you're looking at a market that is such high demand right now in cybersecurity, companies are very, very careful about who they're going to hire, that they're the right fit. They want to get it right the first time. They don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to have to go back to the drawing board. And, I think that we're in this perfect storm right now. If you look at the geopolitical unrest that's happening, the changing regulatory requirements, right? The increased threat landscape that we have because of COVID, this cybersecurity, that was once, just this technology back office function, has become a topic in every boardroom discussion, right? Consumer globally are more aware of digital theft, right? You could sit down at the dinner table or watch television and you're seeing commercials about digital theft. And, so I think, it is so much more on the forefront today that it puts a lot of pressure on companies to really be diligent about who they choose to do those searches, and the types of folks they ultimately end up with. One of the newer areas that we're seeing is ESG, right? And that's environmental, social, and governance. And I think that if we look to the future, ESG is going to have a huge impact in terms of cybersecurity, data risk management, and privacy in particular, right? I think cyber is going to kind of take the center stage in ESG arena because stakeholders and companies are demanding, more disclosures by companies. The SEC, if the law passes, are going to require mandatory disclosures and transparency and accountability about data breaches. So, I think more and more the CISO role is going to continue to be elevated. We do a lot of work. Alta Associates last month was acquired by Diversified Search Group. They are the largest women-led, women-owned executive search firm. And so they do a lot of board placements and C-suite placements. And I was speaking with the board practice leader today, and they're definitely seeing an uptick, in companies that are requiring cyber savvy executives to be on their board, and part of this SEC mandate, if it happens, is really going to be, around questioning, do you have somebody with particular cybersecurity experience on your board? So I think the future is really bright for CISOs. I think that, they've got to kind of sharpen their skills in all of the areas. I like to tell them, what got you your first job as a CISO may not get you your next one. And I think that there's a lot of things outside of technology and cybersecurity that they need to think about to broaden their skills if in fact they want to serve on a board one day, whether that's during their term or at some point in their retirement.
What sort of things would you suggest for somebody that, is that CISO that wants to serve on boards?
Yeah. Well, I think there's, what I would tell them is, there's no time like the present. I think that you prepare for a lot of the important milestones, in your life. But board service, a lot of times people don't think about until, they're close to retirement or they're much later on in their life. And when you think about board service, a lot of how you get on the board relies on your network, your knowledge, but it's not your network of other CISOs or your network of other CIOs. It's your network with bankers and investment bankers and attorneys and, a whole different set of people. That's why I created Board Suited, this online course to help people really think about how to navigate, their path to a board seat. And it's, there is a lot to think about. So I would just say if that's something that's on your mind, you can't be a one-trick pony, right? So think about, what might you need to do to round out your skill set? Do you have that financial acumen? And if not, what can you do to gain some of that? Look and reevaluate what your network is. And if everybody looks and, has the same job as you have, then you probably need to broaden that network, and then finally, let people know they actually want to get on a board. Because, those networks and that word of mouth, is how I got my first board seat. So, you just have to think a little bit differently about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I recently did a podcast with Ed Amoroso, who is the chief security officer for AT&T for many years. And he had some interesting thoughts around the board, which I won't steal all of his thunder in this podcast. But, just thinking about how much the board needs to know about cybersecurity and how do we help make that happen, or should we make that happen, or should that be the board's responsibility?
Yeah. Well, I think, the majority of CISOs that we are doing searches for, companies that are hiring CISOs, they are requiring them to do board presentations, right? So that is an expectation, at the top level companies that the cybersecurity lead would be the person that's presenting to the board. And again, so if you're not doing it yet, then certainly those are the kind of skills that you need to have. I always recommend people, to get an executive coach. I think it's incredibly important to, first of all, know yourself. Second of all, really build your communication skills. and your emotional intelligence. Because once you are on a board, that board etiquette is something that's incredibly important. But it's also important, as a CISO, right? I mean, nobody wants the CISO that's going to come in and break glass, right? They kind of want that iron fist and a velvet glove, right? Who can get things done, who's strong when they need to be strong, but isn't strong just for the sake of being strong.
Absolutely. And I really like the idea about, having to present to the board and get that practice. I teach a master's in cybersecurity leadership course for Northwestern University. And the final exam that I have the students do is they have to write a paper on an issue presenting to the board, and then they have to present to the board. But I only give them 10 minutes, and it's timed. And they have to cover the Q&A in the 10 minutes as well. And it's interesting to see the struggle, because in IT, we like to explain everything.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges I see right now and the frustrations in the CISOs is around building their teams. And, kind of gone are the days that the CISO is judged by their individual performance, right? I mean, their reputation, their success, their compensation even is all based on a combination of their skills, and the team of people that they're really able to surround themselves with. So I can't tell you how many times the CISO reaches out to us, and it takes, months before they're able to kind of pull us into the process. And it's very, very frustrating. And the ones that are successful really, take the hiring into their own hands. And, what I would say is if you don't have that kind of autonomy to build your own team, and you're tethered to kind of an inefficient, internal recruiting process, use the chief in your title. And have some influence and advocate for a search partner, advocate to get your searches filled, because right now, more than ever, it is a candidate driven market. And most internal, HR recruiting functions are already overwhelmed. They don't really understand the nuances of cybersecurity. And oftentimes, we're brought in and the search has been open for 6 or 8 months. And that's not good word on the street for that company. And, and when I think of the reputational risk or the possibility of damage that could be caused because key cyber people aren't in place, it's kind of penny wise and pound foolish. So I would tell CISOs when it comes time to hiring, to really take an ownership of that process. And whether it's us or, somebody else, but really put together a true process that works for your hiring. Because, once somebody starts looking for a new job, even if you interview them, they're going to look elsewhere. So having an executive search firm like us that really manages the process and streamlines it, our average time to fill searches is, less than 75 days. So we get the job done. It's important, so I don't know.
Well, Joyce, I think that's excellent advice. And it's always a joy talking with you. And do you have any final advice for, what CISOs should be doing around their skills, whether it's an emerging CISO, a current CISO, or an experienced CISO, to move forward in their careers?
I would say kind of those 3 things maybe that I touched upon, ask themselves the question, am I positioned for success, right? Do you have the right access and support from the most senior executives in your organization to accomplish your mission? And that goes back to what we were talking before, organizationally in the reporting structure, do you have, the right seat at the table and the right actual influence, and the right budget? And if you're not positioned for success, then you either have to do something internally about it, or do something externally about it, and then look internally and say, do I have the right skills and the right team to accomplish my mission? And, and then ask yourself, are there skills that I should be sharpening to accomplish either my personal goals, or my corporate goals, and they could relate to technical competencies or business acumen or, executive presence. And, all of those things are necessary, if you want to continue to kind of move up the food chain as a bigger and stronger CISO, in a larger and larger organization. And then finally, kind of what are you thinking about doing to propel your career forward? What organizations do you belong to? Are you taking a leadership role in those organizations? How are you, widening that network of contacts that we talked about? These are all kind of big questions that I think, when we all get kind of bogged down in our jobs and overwhelmed, it's hard to think big. That's why I like to run away and go to the beach and sit on a chair and kind of clear your head. I think it's only, for me, I like being on water, right? So if I can sit somewhere and look at water and take a pad and chill out and just start writing, it's amazing, when you give yourself a little bit of space, how creative and innovative you could be.
I think that's great advice. Thanks, Joyce. It's been a pleasure. And thank you very much for sharing your insights.
Okay. Always a pleasure, Todd. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Visit more CISO Stories podcasts on securityweekly.com, where you will find an index of prior episodes. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com.